Thanks, Drew. Appreciate it. I live in Tennessee. I'm an Illinois native, Chicago area, but I've learned living in Tennessee for 21 years. Our opening statement is, what y'all got going on? That's my tire guy says. I pull and go, what you got going on? So nice to have you all here. This is a wonderful, wonderful museum. This is my first time here since it's been built. I remember the old Capitol Museum down the road and seeing flags in there and those nice wooden frames that they used to be in. I hope you kept all those. Those are pretty cool. Those are not like the modern stuff, but they were neat, ornate frames. But you all have a wonderful museum that you should all be proud of as Mississippians, and hopefully for generations of Mississippians to come will be able to come here and enjoy it. So one of the things I like to talk about, besides doing battlefield stuff that I do, is flags, because I'm a flag nerd. So you have a museum nerd shirt downstairs I'm going to buy before I leave. I need a flag nerd shirt. Can somebody make that up real quick? Nan and I were talking about that yesterday, get a flag nerd shirt. So we're going to walk through here, and I've got some notes that I took from some sources I brought with me. We'll talk about different flags. Now, I will warn you in advance, I know more about certain flags than I do about others, because my focus is 18th, 19th century military colors that I work on, and start with about Gustavus Adolphus in the mid 1700s, 1800s, and then through Rev War, and then I ended up about the Spanish-American War. So you'll hear me blab more about maybe a few other things and some other ones, but it's a wonderful exhibit. I walked through here yesterday, and they have other flags on display. What gallery is that in that you took me to yesterday? There's some other flag?
Gallery 4 in Sense of Duty.
Okay. Okay.
Right through that wall.
There you go, right through the wall. Go through the door, not the wall. So, but there's some other great flags here, and there's a Magnolia flag on display. Where was that, Clay, that we saw? Civil Rights Museum. Okay, so they have other great stuff on display. It's a wonderful museum, wonderful museum. Let's get started. We'll walk around through here. One of the things I was impressed about when I walked in here yesterday was doing a timeline of the flags that you're going to see, which I think really helps get you oriented in terms of when certain things are going to happen, because flags will change. The United States flag has changed a number of times from 13 stars from the end of the Revolutionary War period. The flag was, of course, adopted in June of 1777. And I'll throw in a little joke here. I can never remember my wife's birthday other than you're born in June. Then she goes, honey, it's the day before Flag Day. Boom, there you go. So she knows how to make the flag nerd remember the birthday. So, so from 13 stars to the 50 that we have, and other flags are going to evolve as well. State flags will change. The concept of state flags was a post-Civil War phenomena. Very, very few states, mostly the southern ones, and only about 6 or 7 of those states would have state flags. And what we call as historians state flags is your legislature gets together and says the flag of Mississippi shall be, write it all down, vote, yes, no, redo it, goes to the governor, governor signs it, flag. That's how your current state flag came about, correct? And Tennessee's flag, I think we're on our 2nd or 3rd flag in Tennessee. So that's an official state flag. So those evolve, and other flags will evolve over time. Cities change their flags, countries change their flags, states change their flags today. So it's a really wonderful timeline of what we're going to see. We'll start with this one, the Choctaw Indian Nation, the Mississippi Band. You had what they called back then the 5 civilized tribes, which were the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, who also have a Mississippi connection. Vicksburg is, help me out, where's Jeff at? Vicksburg is what, the fourth Chickasaw bluff, or the 3rd? Columbus, Kentucky's on the 1st. I'm trying to think of, Memphis is on the 2nd or the 3rd. Vicksburg's on 1. That was all Chickasaw territory. And Tennessee's boundary and Kentucky's boundary, when they became states, Kentucky breaking off from Virginia, Tennessee breaking off from North Carolina, stopped at the Tennessee River until Isaac Shelby and Andrew Jackson purchased the land from the Chickasaws to the Mississippi River. That's why it's called the Jackson Purchase. So the Chickasaws were very much involved in Mississippi history, the Creek, the Cherokee, and the Seminole. These are different kinds of Indian nations than the horse cultures that are out west. But they do migrate. And how do they migrate? What about that big river you got bordering your state? What about I live on the Cumberland River. What about the Ohio River? When I lived in Ohio, they found relics of Mississippi, Louisiana Indian nations in Ohio. They found relics of Ohio tribes down here. Why? You loaded up your canoe at the Wabash River, you kept going till you hit the Ohio to the Mississippi, stop and do trade. So it's transportation. So these cultures were not just living in an area, they're migratory. There's a lot, hunting grounds, things of that nature. So this is a wonderful flag that talks about, great game, by the way, lacrosse. If you've never watched it, very fast game with their drum and arrowheads. It's a very, very colorful flag. Of course, the state of Oklahoma was called Indian Territory, and with the various Indian removals prior to the Civil War, coming particularly out of Georgia, the Cherokees out of Georgia. I live close to a Trail of Tears pathway that's marked, moving to the Indian Territory, and that becomes, of course, Oklahoma afterwards, which thankfully for the musical, Oklahoma comes swinging down the plain, as the song is better than Indian Territory comes singing down the plain. So you get a nice song out of it. But it's a wonderful culture that's been around for quite a long time, and I did see some artifacts in the museum yesterday, so do check that out. It's really, really wonderful history. I was in Southwest Missouri on business the other day, and a guy that I was with, he had a Chickasaw license plate on his car. That was very, very pretty. So we'll move over to here, to the Mississippi Territory, 13-star flag. Now, this is not a typical 13-star flag, which were in a circle, and the lengths of stars being in a circle is symbolic in that you help me, I help you type of a thing. So it's like a link of everybody's in this together. We're not standalone. 13 colonies, now 13 states, and as more and more states will join the Union, they will add their star to the flag. This flag is a United States Navy boat flag, however. As soon as Drew sent me the print, I went, oh, that's a Navy boat flag. And it comes from Admiral Richard Henry, which is interesting because he was Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Navy Fleet. He wasn't, I forget what Admiral King was, Chief of the Navy, I forget what the rank is nowadays. But he was a fleet commander, and this was a flag that came from him. Boat flags actually do start somewhat in the Continental Navy in the Revolutionary War. And what a boat flag is a ship, even today, has a huge panoply of flags. So we could take a modern Arleigh Burke class destroyer. So we'll have the ship's ensign, doesn't fly from the stern anymore, flies up after the funnel from one of the masts up there. Very large flag because you want the other guy to know who you're messing with. So you want to be able to see that flag. They will also have a storm flag in inclement weather. They will lower the bigger ensign and hoist a storm flag. They'll probably have 2 or 3 of those in their flag locker. Then on the bow, when that ship is in port, they'll have a jack, which is a blue flag with the corresponding number of stars. It's not a very big one. There's a jack on display that I saw here yesterday, and that will only be hoisted when that warship is in port. And then you have a panoply of signal colors. So you can signal other ships in the fleet by non-radio or satellite communication. Signal flags have gone back for hundreds of years on naval vessels. And then you're going to have what they call saluting flags. So say this destroyer puts into port in Brest, France, they will hoist a French tricolor as a salute to the French, or they'll hoist a British flag if they put into Portsmouth or something like that. So that's the way it was in the 18th and 19th century as well. So you had a whole set of colors. What the boat flags were, a larger warship will have a bunch of small launches on board, lifeboats and the commander or the captain's gig, as it was called. So when you have a warship, let's take, say, the USS Kearsarge that sank the Alabama, or even the USS or the CSS Alabama. There was a captain's gig on board, and then there were, I think the Alabama had 6 boats. I think the Kearsarge had 5, if I remember. And each of those boats, when they go in the water, has a little stern flagstaff, and you put one of these up there. Now, why you only have 13 stars? The debate on that is still going on. They started at 20 stars, went down to 16 stars in the mid-1850s, and then starting about 1858, 59, they will switch to 13. Homage to the 13 colonies? Maybe. The Navy didn't write a lot of stuff down in those days in terms of what their plan or thought process was. What they were looking at, though, is this small of a flag. You want to try cramming, 32 stars on it, or even 50 stars today? Guess what the U.S. Navy does? 50 stars. They don't use these anymore. That changed in the early 20th century. In fact, it changed before this gentleman was commanding that fleet. So I'm kind of amazed that he still had an old 13-star boat flag. But there is a table of allowances that you can find online for the U.S. Navy and the Confederate Navy for the Civil War era. Table of allowances classifies your warships 1 to 14 for the Union Navy, and I think the Confederates had 6. And it's based on the size of your ship of the line, 400 or 500 crewmen, the weight, how many guns it carried, all the way down to a 2-gun tugboat or something like that. And from the U.S. Navy table of allowances for flags, which also told you how many flags that ship's supposed to carry, it's rating 10 through 14 were boat flags. So you could have a small warship and have a flag like that, and that's that ship's ensign, even though it is officially classified a boat flag. And if it has a launch on board or a lifeboat, it will have these as well. And then you have the giant ensigns and the storm flags and all of that other kind of stuff in between. Let's move over here to when Mississippi becomes a state. Excuse me. This is the flag. What gallery is this one in? We saw it yesterday. Gallery 3. Okay, so you can go see the original flag, which is fantastic. Made of wool bunting, that imported English wool bunting. American bunting doesn't come online till about 1866. The world standard was English imported wool bunting. The United States Navy used it, the United States government used it, the United States Army used it for very, very large post and garrison and storm flags, because you had to have a flag that was durable. Even as it was, a warship flag at sea in the U.S. Navy at this time would wear out after about 4 to 5 months. And you'll sometimes see pictures of the sailors have done repairs of the flag. It's like the fly end, this is the fly end of the flag, whipping in a sea breeze when you're out in the middle of the ocean. That's the part of the flag that tears up first. So as the flag frays, they would fold it back and sew it down. So you'd have, say, an 18-foot naval ensign on the back of your ship, and then maybe by the time you go back into port, it might be down to, 16 feet or something like that, because, well, just keep folding over, sew it back down, cut pieces and patch it up. I've seen several naval flags that were patched up, including a naval flag with a connection to the CSS Alabama. So this is when Mississippi becomes a state. We'll talk a little bit about the predecessor flag act, so 20 stars. And this is not a very common flag, because in this time frame, a bunch of states jump into the Union. So you go from 16 to 20 real quick, and then 20 to about 24 real quick. So these flags are not going to last very long. Where's Clay? What did you say? That there were, 4 of these known?
4 known to exist originally. There's only a flag that flew technically for 1 year.
Yeah. So this is the book of the Zeracore collection. He had one, a 20-star, and I don't know where the other 2 are. So when you see that flag on display here, 1 of 4 is not a lot of flags. That's pretty rare. It's an interesting oval pattern with an extended long canton, which is always fascinating. And one thing I like to tell the people that my mentor Howard Mattis taught me years ago, keep in mind, this is the start of, at this time, the start of Jacksonian America, and the after effects of that carry on into the Civil War. And there are specifics about what this flag of the United States is supposed to look like, particularly from the Flag Act of 1794, which, by the way, codified the flag as 15 stars and 15 stripes. That's what the Star-Spangled Banner at Fort McHenry was when the British fleet showed up to bombard the fort, and the national anthem comes from that. It was a big flag. They've got it at the Smithsonian if you're ever there, you want to see it. So is it practical the more states come in to keep adding stars? Yeah. How about stripes? Do you want to see a 50-star flag with 50 stripes? You're going to have stripes that are microscopic, and you want the flag to be seen. That's the whole point. So the Flag Act of 1818, which happens just before the creation of this flag and the Mississippi joining the Union, will change some things to 13 stripes and 20 stars, boom, that one, and then 21 stars when Illinois joins in officially 1818 after the Flag Act in December. The Flag Act of 1818 codifies the flag to 13 stripes and then the stars. But the second thing it does is tells you when you add the star for a state. Prior to this time, if a state joined the Union, Congress would vote. Do we want them in? Yes. How about adding a star? Good to go, add the star. The Flag Act of 1818, which is still in effect today, so let's say Puerto Rico joins the Union tomorrow. Their star doesn't get added to the flag until the following July 4th. If they join July 3rd, their star is on the flag the next day by law. So the Flag Act of 1818 took the power out of the hands of Congress directly and trying to figure out what's going on into codifying what the flag of the United States is going to look like, and it drops it back down to 13 stripes. So this is an incredibly rare flag. Do go see it. I had a really good time looking at it. And as I said, Illinois joins in December of 1818, and when does Mississippi join here? December 1817. So just year before Illinois does. So you can see the rapid joining of states coming into the Union. Now we get to the secession era, and the secession era, and when the first 7 states go out, they declare themselves republics because the trying not to violate the federal supremacy clause of the of the U.S. Constitution, which says that no 2 states can go into compact with each other. So to get around that, you declare yourselves a Republic of Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia, Texas. Texas had already been a republic from 1836 to 1845, and they had the first official state flag dating to 1839. And I can tell you a funny story about Texas flags afterwards, because of so many people moving out there. They had to, when Texas secedes, they had to put articles in the newspaper describing to these new residents what the Texas flag looked like. Something like 80% of Texas Confederate soldiers and Arkansas were not born in Texas. They were all people that went west prior to the war. So Texas will have the first official sort of state flag coming from the Texas Republic. And as I said, the states all have flags today. That's a post-Civil War phenomena. Mississippi will be one of the ones that adopts a flag of the Republic. And it's based on the Bonnie Blue flag or the Lone Star flag, because there are other Lone Star flags of different colors. So I call them Lone Stars. It dates to the 1810 West Florida Republic. The West Florida Republic is the panhandle of Florida from the Perdido River through lower Alabama, through lower Mississippi, and parts of Louisiana to the Mississippi River. It was Spanish, then French, and then Spanish, and then they decided to want to join the United States. There was a filibuster of settlers there that marched on the Spanish garrison of Baton Rouge carrying a white flag with a white star in the center, but that flag was bordered in white. I found a period newspaper description of it. But this is a flag, and the concept of a Lone Star is going to carry on into the secession era of the Civil War. And you're going to see Lone Star flags popping up in Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina. And then you can add other devices. Like in South Carolina, they'll add their palmetto tree, things of that nature. So when Mississippi secedes, they will hoist a, quote, Bonnie Blue flag, which will get its name from Harry McCarthy, a traveling minstrel, if you will, is in Jackson when they hoist the flag. Crowd's going nuts, and he's inspired to take an Irish song called Irish Jaunting Car and put new words to it, and it becomes the Bonnie Blue flag. Hurrah for the Bonnie Blue flag that bears a single star. Back then, they didn't have good copyright lawyers because he would have been sued for plagiarism, like he would be today. I work in the music business, so I know how that works. But the point being is when the Secession Convention decides what is going to be the flag of the Republic of Mississippi, because there is a physical connection in Mississippi to West Florida, the hoisting of that flag earlier in the month of January, they are going to make that a central device. And then the magnolia tree being central to also Mississippi heritage. But what their code says is a red border like that to the hoist edge, and then a red fringe on the end. That's in the codification of the Secession Convention. So Clay and I were looking at these flags, and the other one is in the Civil Rights Museum. And this is, again, a tail end of Jacksonian America, which my mentor said, if it's not written down, we can do it, right? because there's nothing that says we can't. I have since modified that to, even if it's written down, we don't care, we're doing what we want. Boom. So you have to, and this happens throughout flag, even in the North, flags will be, okay, it's supposed to be this, I don't care, this is my flag for a unit or a building or whatever. And this is a case of that. I believe this one's post-war, and the flag kind of comes back into use after the war is over till 1894, thank you, yeah, 1894, when the state flag changes yet again. I think it's a very strikingly pretty flag, I really do. Very pretty color. But the the symbolism also means as Mississippi is reaching into that constellation of stars of the U.S. flag, go, we'll take that back, thank you very much. So I don't know if you saw my program yesterday, I talked about Southern inclusionary flags where they would use stars and stripes and only put up the stars for the 15, up to the 15 slave states, and only which 11 secede, 2 kind of nominally do, Kentucky and Missouri. All right, questions, anything? All right, let's move around the old corner here. Can everybody get in here so you can see? I want you to be able to see everything and stuff, because I'm going to point to a couple things on this flag. This is a great example of a Confederate First National flag. When the Confederate States of America meets in Montgomery, Alabama to take those 7 republics and form a political and military alliance and call themselves the Confederate States of America, a new country is created, right? So what do you have to represent your new country? A flag. So they will set forth, I don't know how many were at my program yesterday, I talked about William Portia Miles of South Carolina, was the expert in heraldry. He was the chair of the Committee on Flag and Seal of the Confederate Congress. I've got the journals of the Congress. The first thing they did after they seated everybody into the Congress and elected a president of the House and a president of the Senate is they formed the Committee on Flag and Seal. That was the first official act of the Confederate Congress. And Miles with 6 other gentlemen from each of the states were on the committee, and they advertised, what shall the flag of the Confederate nation be? And they got in hundreds of letters with hand sketches and little sewn flags and things of that nature, which are all at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. in the book of Confederate flags designs for both the first, second, and third national flag, but predominantly the first. And they ran the gamut of basically 3 levels. One's inspired by the flag of the United States was overwhelmingly what was sent in. Overwhelmingly. The feeling being, and some of the correspondence says, we're not really mad at the flag because we fought for that flag too. Mexican-American War, War of 1812, the Creek War, Seminole War, all that. We're mad at the government. So that's going to be a lot of the inspiration. Then you get flags with the saltire like that on there, which a lot of people like to think the South was loaded with Scotsmen. No, the South was not. It was loaded with Englishmen and a handful of Scots. That was a saltire of heraldry, as Portia Miles called it. Then you had flags that he called in his report of a fantastical design. Wish I had some pictures I could show you, but there were some of these flags that I made a kind of a joke yesterday that when I bought the first Jimi Hendrix album in 1967, one of those flags was the poster inside, and I could put my blacklight on and go, wow, that's cool. I mean, these were amazing designs. So if you have a kind of a fantastic design like that, does that lead itself to mass production? No. So Miles was like, pretty, but nope, keep it simple. And Miles understood this. So the Committee on Flag and Seal created 4 designs. One was red with a circle, one was kind of a variant of this, and then there was this one, and then Miles' design was a saltire flag with only 7 stars on it. And what he did that for was because being a South Carolinian, the Jewish community of Charleston was incredibly politically powerful, economically powerful in that state at the time. And he started getting letters from Charles Moisey of that community and saying, we're looking at this flag. That was what they wanted, was what they called the Cross of St. George, which is English. That flag is a flag of the Christian church. Well, not really. The Latin cross is. But to them, we can't support that. We're Jews. And then he started getting letters from fundamentalist Christian sects that said, that's a misuse of the flag of our church. We're not going to support that. So Miles just goes, okay, let's take this, flip it to the saltire. Everybody good? Everybody was good, except for the fact with only 7 stars, it looked asymmetrical. And a congressman in the Confederate Congress said, that looks like a pair of blue suspenders. So that one's not gonna fly. Miles does not like this design. He issues the report on March 4th, 1861 to the Confederate Congress, goes through the whole thing that I just went through about the submissions and stuff. And this flag was designed by the committee. Why was March 4th, 1861 a crucial day that at least one of these had to be on a flagpole somewhere in the South? We don't do that anymore. We do it on January 20th now. Inauguration of Abraham Lincoln. So that's what they had to do. They wanted a flag up on a pole as an in-your-face kind of a device, and that's exactly what it was for. Miles wrote in his report, designed by the committee, which completely shoots down the post-war claims of, what's his name from North Carolina? Orrin Randolph Smith and Nicola Marshall of Alabama. Smith was from North Carolina. And the UDCs I talked about yesterday, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, literally went to war with each other, trying to come up with I've got my file about like this on that stuff. It's hilarious reading. And no, our guy designed it. No, he didn't. Our guy designed it. Neither guy designed it. You cannot find their names in that book in the National Archives with a search warrant. They're not there. I have a complete copy of that book. They're not in there. Right around the same time, by the way, Betsy Ross's grandson said, by the way, my grandma designed the Stars and Stripes. No, she didn't. She made them, didn't design them. Francis Hopkinson did that. So there's your mythology going down. I'm shooting it down left and right. What's interesting is if you go to Gettysburg, you see the North Carolina Monument, the color bearer, that's Orrin Randolph Smith's face on the color bearer. So they still kind of buy it over there. So this is a wonderful example, and the first, of course, is with 7 stars, typically in a circle, but what you see here is the flag maker's taste in terms of what it is. 9 stars covers when North Carolina joins the Union, or excuse me, the Confederacy on May 20th of 1861, and you see he signed it. It's Henry Cassidy, who was a sailmaker in New Orleans, and near Canal Street was where his business was. Cassidy will make a bunch of flags, the brag pattern flags that there's 2 in this collection. He'll make those. He will also make tents. He'll leave New Orleans when the Federals show up under Farragut, and he will move to Jackson, and he will join up with a gentleman named Poole, Cassidy and Poole, and be a tent maker for the Confederate military. James Cameron out of Memphis will refugee down here for a while, and then he ends up in Mobile. But Cassidy is a major league player. Now, what does he do to make this flag? See, bolts of bunting are 18 inches wide, but you've got 3 stripes here. He can't, 4 stripes, 5 stripes. He cannibalized the U.S. flag for this. And you'll see those popping up. You'll see repurposed United States flags. And then the 9 stars, and he tended to only put his stars on one side and then cut out the other side of the flag. Whether it was on the obverse like you see here or the reverse. Reverse is hoist to that side, obverse is hoist to this side. So this is a really cool flag that has to do with Vicksburg. Jeff here was asking me yesterday what the heck happened to all the 80 plus flags that Grant said were captured at Vicksburg. Well, here's one, but very, very few. None of them got sent to the War Department. None. Here's a really interesting flag that I've always liked. Even though I'm gonna chide Nan. This is upside down, you know. It's upside down. Canton should be up over here. But if you did that, you couldn't read the cool capture information on here, right? So I have 2 pictures in my photo file, one that I photoshopped and flipped over, and then one that's just like this. So here's another flag from the Vicksburg campaign. Maker's Taste, again, Jacksonian America. How many stars are on that flag? 15. There you go. Mississippi, if you saw my program yesterday, I showed 2 other flags that were made in Mississippi for troops that have been captured at Fort Donelson, where I live, exchanged at Vicksburg, and then would fight here in John Gregg's brigade and some other units because Vicksburg was the exchange point for exchange prisoners of war. I forget what the Union exchange point was, but Vicksburg was the one for the South. And so those guys never got to go back to Tennessee. They got new battle flags of the Saltire or Southern Cross pattern with 15 stars. And there are 2 other flags to the Vicksburg campaign also with 15 stars. There is one flag in California that was hoisted in Sacramento in 1861 with 17 stars. That's the Biderman flag. What's the 2 other stars, you think?
Maryland and Delaware?
What's that?
Maryland and Delaware?
No, that's part of the 15. Yeah, Maryland, Delaware.
Missouri.
That's the 11th, that's the 13th, 11th and 12th, or the 12th, 13th. No?
Is it Arizona?
New Mexico Territory, which was part of Arizona, was part of Southern California. Southern California was very pro-Southern. I lived out there for a while and did a study on Southern sentiment when I was working on blue and gray. And the bear flag, which is the flag of California, that was a flag of secession versus Mexican rule. The bear flag comes into creation then, and the bear flag starts showing up in 1860. Southern California and Northern California were wanting to even split in 1858, and they were going to call Southern California the Republic of the Pacific. So that secession is kind of in their blood out that way. But I love this flag. It's always been one of my favorite First National. Get a chance to come over here and look at the delicate kind of sewing in terms of where they put how they pieced the stars in there and the way the flag was put together. This could have been a company flag because of its smaller size. It could have just been a patriotic flag as well. So these flags will serve a multiple purpose. I'm going to tell you about this one. This is one that I really like because this one is actually a Vicksburg capture. Let me tell you about Willard Baker of the 20th Iowa Infantry, who's the guy that got this and would later capture 2 other flags in Mobile in May of 1865, because that leads to a controversy a little bit later on. So this is a Southern Cross style battle flag. It's not a depot-made battle flag. I'd love to know who made this one. I don't. But when the National Park Service a few years ago on their Facebook page did a post about there were no Southern Cross flags in the Vicksburg campaign, guy alerted me to it. I jumped right on there and said, "How wrong do you want me to prove you?" And I gave a whole list with images and everything else. And the ranger contacted me and basically said, "Hey, would you help me? I'm going to do a flag thing." I said, "Yeah, I'll send you all what I've got on it." So this is an example of one of those flags. Willard Baker was a personal flag capturing machine. He will get 3 flags in the war, the other 2 in Mobile in May of 65. And he will keep these flags well into the late 1800s. And when veterans reunions of his regiment, the 20th Iowa, or the Sons of, not Sons of Union Veterans, the Grand Army of the Republic, which beget the Sons of Union Veterans, will have reunions, Baker would bring his flags and put them up on display. Well, newspapers in Iowa, thankfully for historians like me, did a good job writing. Baker has 3 flags, 1 taken at Vicksburg and 2 taken in Mobile. One of the flags he takes in Mobile is a large red palmetto flag with the crescent and the palmetto tree on it. And there was a group of guys from the Citadel Military Academy that are convinced, as Drew is standing there, that flag was the star of the Citadel Battery's flag in January 1861 when they fired on the Star of the West trying to come into Fort Sumter. It's not. And they're trying to say it was captured at Fort Blakely by the 20th Iowa. If you look at the map of Fort Blakely, 20th Iowa is way up here. South Carolina Battery is way down here, not even close. And I sent all this stuff to the Citadel a year or so ago and said, what does Baker say? I got this in Mobile from a burning house owned by a guy from South Carolina. When Farragut shuts off Mobile Bay in August of 1864, the Battle of Mobile Bay, he closes it at a blockade running port, and there are 5 blockade runners still bottled up in Mobile. 2 have South Carolina connections. That's where that flag came from. They did a test on it, said it's got sea salt. Well, yeah, if you're on a ship, you're gonna have sea salt. And then the other one he captured at that building was also a First National. Both of those flags are still in Iowa. So I'm very glad that Iowa did a nice thing and sent this flag back to y'all. It's a very rare example because there's not exactly one that looks exactly like this one. The style is similar, but not the construction. So as the war carries on, pushed by guys like Miles and other people, this flag, by the way, will be replaced in May of 63 by that flag as a political and a military color. But there are examples of this flag being used all the way to the very end of the war. There are some captured in the Battle of Nashville in December of 64, some captured in the Atlanta campaign, some surrendered at Appomattox. So these flags are not exactly going away. So they start not long after, several months after this is adopted, of putting in suggestions for new flags. 2 Southern papers were flag nerds, the Richmond Dispatch, the Charleston Mercury. If you had something about a flag, they wrote articles about it. And they published articles with a couple of new submissions, and not saying as a headline, this is a proposed flag. They said, quote, the new flag of the Confederacy, to the point that people went, sweet, start making them. So some of these will start showing up, even though it doesn't happen until May 1, 1863, when you get the second national flag. Now, the Confederate Navy had to sign off on this because it resembles a British white naval ensign, which is now the British Royal Navy ensign completely. But back then they had three fleets, the red, the blue, and the white, depending on where they were posted. And the British naval ensign would have the Cross of St. George on there with the Union Jack as the canton. And the Confederate Navy guy said, hey, that's great, look close enough to a Royal Navy ensign. This is the 44th Mississippi's flag. Brentwood Hills is the Battle of Nashville. If you come visit us in Nashville at Fort Negley, you can stand looking south and you will see the Brentwood Hills, where the town of Brentwood is today. And it was captured in that battle. For whatever reason, Featherston's Mississippi Brigade and William Loring's division, which had Mississippi troops in it, had a bunch of second national battle flags. Down in the bookstore downstairs, they have a copy of Grady Howell's Great Regimental History of the 3rd Mississippi. And he has a finding in there that in December of '63, they bought a bunch of cloth to make this flag as a battle flag for that regiment. And this guy was a tailor, and they had him do it. So that is what we think happened with, whether it's that guy or other guys, a bunch of these flags get made. And you can see how the cross is square, kind of overlaps. There's one in the exhibit upstairs where it comes to points. So again, the maker's taste. It doesn't have the white fimbration that was a part of the official flag there to separate the colors of the borders. That would have made William Miles go nuts, because he says, no, you have to have a color bar in there to separate the primary colors. But a number of these flags will show up. They'll be captured in the Atlanta campaign. They'll be captured at Nashville. I had a couple in my program yesterday. The number here is 209. That was a War Department number. When they start sending these to the War Department after February of 1862, when Congress says, we're getting flags, what do we do with them? The War Department will take them, and starting in late '63, they will start to log them in a book. And you can get Xeroxes of the actual book from the National Archives, and they will stamp numbers on there. And then so you look at the logbook of War Department 209, it will say this unit, where it was captured with the capture information, and then continue on to the 500s is what they're going to end up with. Sometimes they got the IDs wrong. And which befuddles guys like me trying to figure out who the heck the flag really does belong to. But this one is pretty succinct. It's marked. I'm sure when they grabbed the color bearer and said, what regiment? 44th Mississippi, put that on the flag when we get a chance. And that's exactly what they did. So you'll see some captured Confederate flags where they actually paint things on here, which helps us identify what it is. So do you see a problem with this flag hanging limp from a flagpole with no breeze? What color are you going to see a lot of? White. What is typically white in military terms? Truce or surrender? Back we go to the Confederate Congress. Major Arthur Rogers, an artilleryman in the Army of Northern Virginia, says, well, the flag's kind of cool as the battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia. How about if we just add a vertical red bar? And he had three designs where the bars curved at various levels in terms of how far into the flag. This started getting discussed in December of 1864, and you would think by December of 1864 the Confederacy had a lot of other things to worry about besides changing their flag. They're not winning, they're getting gobbled up like crazy. But let's change the flag. So they will add the vertical red bar. Now this gets discussed, as I said, in December, and it hits the Richmond newspaper, the Dispatch in particular, and it goes throughout the South by a telegraph. And the word comes out of what the new flag is going to be. Exceedingly few make it as military colors. I showed you the one for the 18th Mississippi Cavalry yesterday that's still in private hands. That does make the field. The 5th Florida Cavalry Battalion's flag that's in Decatur, Georgia, makes the field. The 5th Alabama Battalion has one. In fact, if you look at Don Troiani's painting of the surrender at Appomattox, the leading column, I think it's Gordon's division, and the 5th Alabama Battalion were in there, you can see the color bearer holding the furled 3rd National, because you can see part of the white bar. The vast majority are post-war. United Confederate Veterans, the veterans organization, will start showing up. This is a post-war example. You can easily tell A by the metal grommets. on there, and the zigzag stitching, which doesn't start happening until the mid-1880s as a flag making or star technique. Typically when you're doing stars, and you can compare the two, you'll stitch around the outside versus stitch outside and across the star. So when these flags pop up, and this is a war, we can look at the stars right off the bat and go, no, that's post-war, not before 1880 at least. So not many of these will get out. So they're exceedingly rare for the war. I talked yesterday about Jackson Belknap and his wife Sarah in Mobile, Alabama, who, if you go into the war gallery to see it, you'll see what's left of the canton of the Shibuda Rifles of the 14th Mississippi. It's a Fort Donelson flag. So as a guy who does tours of Fort Donelson, thank you for having Fort Donelson stuff on display. I like having that. That was a flag that gets smuggled out because he cuts the center out and puts it in his coat. Goes up to Camp Douglas in Chicago and comes back and is exchanged. Hey, look what I saved! Woohoo! They were really happy about that. Jackson Belknap painted that. On the reverse side where the snake and the magnolia tree is, his name is on the flag. He gets the contract starting in October of '63, making these 12-star battle flags out of Mobile. We don't know why he just goes with 12 stars. It may be because Beauregard's personal 12-star flag was sent there for safekeeping. Maybe, don't know. Haven't found the connect the dots yet. A popular myth today is a lot of people call this the Bedford Forrest battle flag because his corps does use them, but not until July of '64. And he goes, Forrest was mad at Kentucky. No, Forrest had nothing to do with making this flag at all. So this is the flag of the 4th Mississippi, who were Donelson veterans. And these are cut and sewn cotton letters. That's cotton, polished cotton stars, wool bunting. And these are pieced together. A Army of Northern Virginia battle flag is much easier to make because what you have to do to make this flag is you start with the cross and then you have to piece in the quadrants. Which if I know some guys that have done that and they're just like, no, this is not how you make flags. It's much slower. But the battle honors tend to be chronological, Fort Henry, because they were there. It's before Fort Donelson. And then around here to the Vicksburg campaign at Chickasaw Bayou, Port Gibson, and Big Black River. So that's all a Mississippi campaign of late '62 and into the surrender of Vicksburg. Battle honors also help us date when a flag is issued, because they tend to be chronological, so there's no way this flag is issued after Fort Henry. A, the pattern doesn't exist, and B, that tells you that they had other things coming, so they get this flag after about June of 1863, coming out of Mobile. So these flags go to the Mobile garrison. S.D. Lee's Cavalry Corps, Forrest Cavalry Corps gets them last in July of '64. Polk's Army in Mississippi that will come over to Georgia in the Atlanta campaign. But there's a bunch of these around. Belknap, you can see it's a hoist sleeve, so the pole will slip through here and then put on the flagstaff. Over here is a remnant of an Army of Northern Virginia pattern battle flag. War Department 158, I believe. Is that an 8 or a 6? Looks like an 8. Flip to my cliff notes here. Yeah, it looks like, I think it's 158. Captured the Battle of Weldon Railroad. The Weldon Railroad was the line that came in from North Carolina into Virginia, supplying Lee at Petersburg and Richmond, and there was a number of fights along the Weldon Railroad, and this being one of them. It's the flag of the 16th Mississippi, captured by a gentleman from the 7th Wisconsin. And what you see here is his mates souvenired the flag. They just cut it to shreds, pulled out their knives and stuff, and just cut their little bitty pieces. As I like to tell people, there's no such things as square and rectangular Yankee cannonballs. So this is souveniring. Now, there is battle damage here. That's a bullet hole, that's a bullet hole, that's a bullet hole, bullet hole, bullet hole, and bullet hole or artillery shrapnel from case shot or things like that. When you look at an older flag, the easiest way to tell bullet damage or combat damage versus bug damage, what becomes moths, eats very nice and neat. So if you look at here, you can see the jagged threads. When you see moth holes, it's real even. So you'll see some flags with bug damage and some with bullet holes. And this Weldon Railroad was a pretty hairy fight, so that saw some combat there. The flag would have been about 45 inches square. This is one of the post 1863 issue flags, and because they're trying to save the wool bunting coming in from England. I don't know where the rest of the flag is. Some Wisconsin boys have got it, I guess. What a striking color, an absolute striking color. This would have been all painted devices as this one is. You have yellow, which actually was the cavalry color, and still is the cavalry color. Red's the artillery color. But it's a beautiful flag with nice painted stars. The crossed golden cannon barrels, muzzles up, which is the symbol even today of United States Army artillery, muzzles up on the thing. And then you see presented by the colored citizens of Natchez to the 5th Regiment, U.S. Heavy Artillery Company C. Let me backtrack here a little bit. How many saw Glory? Awesome movie, great movie. 54th Massachusetts was not the first black regiment of the Civil War. There was the first Kansas Colored that was raised about 6 months earlier and had already fought a battle out in the Trans-Mississippi before the 54th is put together. They form in August of '62. Then when Benjamin Butler is down in Louisiana, he sort of issues his own Emancipation Proclamation and starts to recruit black regiments there. The 1st through 3rd Louisiana Native Guard, and officially called Corps d'Afrique, Africa Corps. Not the Germans of World War II, but the Africa Corps in French because of the French heritage. Those 3 regiments will later, when the U.S. colored troops forms in early 1863, after the Emancipation Proclamation takes effect on January 1 of 1863, Lorenzo Thomas, the Adjutant General of the Army, will issue the orders to start recruiting black men, runaway slaves, freedmen, whoever else wants to join and fight. And they will end up with about 185,000 guys, a game changer for the Union. And one of their first battles, in fact, will be the Battle of Milliken's Bend, which is across the river from Vicksburg, which was Grant's supply depot. They had troops holding that area to protect the supplies, and John Walker's Texas Division will attack them and get soundly defeated. A company of this unit was there. So that is a really interesting battle, one of the very first battles that kind of proves to the higher-ups of the United States Army that these guys will fight. Well, yeah, they're kind of highly motivated to fight. So the recruiting carries on. Where I live in Tennessee, we had at least 4 USCT units come out of Middle Tennessee, 12th, 13th, 16th, and the 101st come out of my area. So these guys will actually form in May of 1863 as the 9th Louisiana Infantry, African Descent. And there'll be several other Louisiana units called African Descent also after the 3 Native Guard units that Butler will create. In September 26th, they become the 1st Regiment Mississippi Heavy Artillery, African Descent. And then on March of 1864, they become the 4th United States Colored Heavy Artillery. And then in April, a month later, they become the 5th. So designations change. Forget the book. It's called Men of Colors at William Goldsboro. It's about USCT units and antecedents. He talks and shows the timelines of units raised and then changing their names and where they were raised. He also has a number of really awesome flag pictures in there. But this flag is just stunningly gorgeous. It would have been more used for ceremonial purposes because for an artillery color, this is really big. Now, heavy artillery is not going into the field with their 12-pound Napoleons and 10-pound Parrott rifles and stuff. They're manning big guns. And these guys will be part of the post-capture of Vicksburg garrison to protect it, because Vicksburg will become an enclave of Union troops, and they'll have raids coming out of Vicksburg as they do with Memphis and things like that. So these guys will be manning the heavy guns to protect Vicksburg from a possible Confederate counterattack. Now, you can fly this when you're in a fixed position, but you're not going to take an artillery flag this big into the field. An artillery flag is typically going to be significantly smaller. And the color bearer of an artillery battery is called the guidon, and you usually had that parked in the back anyway. I mean, your guns were enough of a target, gee, they're shooting at us, those are enemy guns, let's shoot back. You don't even need to see the flag. But artillery colors are typically significantly smaller. A beautiful, beautiful flag, glad that it's here. This is Army of Northern Virginia 3rd Wool Bunting issue battle flag, captured at the Battle of Chancellorsville, you'll see some of the writing that'll say, but a 77 New York will say captured in the engagement at Fredericksburg. Chancellorsville is just outside Fredericksburg. In fact, there were the two battles of Fredericksburg, the famous one December of 62, where Burnside got clobbered, and then in 63, part of Lee's troops are facing a Union push across the river again, while Jackson's doing his famous flank march, and that'll end up at the Battle of Salem Church. So this is a wonderful example of the flag of the, I believe it's the 16th Mississippi. Make my notes here. Flip the page, Greg. 18th. Thank you. Jeff is my understudy. Thank you, Jeff. War Department number 3. So this is one of the very first ones logged into the War Department when they started actually cataloging their colors. And what helps is you can see the inked thing that these Union soldiers from the New York Regiment will put on here. Battle flag captured the May 3rd Chancellorsville by the 77 New York Volunteers, and the colonel and what division, and more details here. That really helps us historians know what this is, because what do you see? Where's a unit designation? There isn't one. Most of the Army of Northern Virginia battle flags are not marked. Very, very few will have battle honors. Very, very few will have unit designations. It's basically 4 divisions and 2 brigades out of that army that does it. Imported English wool bunting. Let me show you how. Come on close here if you can, so you can see the widths of the looms. See how this works. 18-inch width. See there? 18-inch width, 12-inch width. So when these are made, you put the field together, the red field. Then you make your cross, 3 pieces, 1 long, 2 short, pieced together in the center by what they call flat fell seams. Okay? You take a piece of the cloth and put it on the next piece of the cloth and you stitch it down. A, it helps you do it better than a looping kind of a whip stitch this way. B, it's much stronger. And then over the flat fell seams, you will sew the decorative fimbration. This is 1 piece of polished cotton that would be about this long, and then they cut it and then lay it down and see how it's folded in the corners, and then you just fold it over and then you stitch it down. So not only is it decorative, you're stitching it on both sides, covering the flat fell seam between the red and the blue. So strength, because these things are being wool bunting, they're pretty durable anyway, but you want them to last. Now I was talking yesterday about the flag of the 7th Tennessee that was escaped from being captured in Pickett's charge, and what the color bearer did was reached up to the corner and yanked it off the top tie, and it tore right along the upper fimbration seam. So it can be a weak point, and he shoved it in his shirt and crawled his way back to his lines to save that flag. And you'll see other examples of that where a flag is torn, and sometimes you'll see field repair. Look at the battle damage. Those 2 are probably insect. But you can see some bullets and things went through this flag. Battle of Chancellorsville was a pretty big fight. And then War Department number 3. Great example. This is a fall or late summer of 63 flag. If you go to the, what exhibits the 2 Mississippi flags in again? The Breakout B. The military gallery, they have 2 flags of the 2nd Mississippi. The one captured at Gettysburg that was made prior to August of 1863, and its replacement flag with the Gettysburg Honor made in probably September of 63, when to save imported wool bunting, because they ran out in June and were out of bunting for about 3 months till the next ship came in from England into Wilmington. They would take it to, because 18, 18, and 12 doesn't make sense. That's 6 inches of bunting you're wasting. The one with the Gettysburg Battle Honor, 18, 18, 9. So you take an 18-inch bolt and you cut it in half. Guess what you get to do with the other 9-inch bolt? Put it on another flag. So the flag goes from about 48 inches square, roughly what this is, to 45. And then it changes after that, starting in the spring of 63. Excuse me, spring of 64. This is a wonderful militia flag. Connection. Soldiers, I get to work with the Army where I am doing staff rides, and soldiers have a patriotic love of country, which is why they do it. But you bring it down to the local level, because the United States Army is very homogenized now. We don't recruit by state. The National Guard does, but the U.S. Army doesn't. But back in these days, the militia could be a town organization. If a town's big enough to put 80 to 100 guys into a militia company, then your connection is home. You're representing your wives, your family, your sweethearts, your cousin, and the family members are in that unit. Your dad could be in there, you're in there, your brother, your cousins. So that is a bond that I think a lot of Americans don't understand, presented by the ladies of Brandon. So this is a beautiful, beautiful pre-war flag. Let me find where my notes are for this guy. Oh, back on this page. And gives you an example of what some militia colors can be like. Now, what can sometimes happen, because in the militia era, where you're using as your basis the stars and stripes of the United States, and this is, by the way, a close to 1861 regulation flag. It's not quite 1861 regulations of 6 by 6.5 feet. There you are, way here on the last page. And then nice, beautiful embroidery. Now, one of the things that I've learned over the years as a flag historian is that women didn't do the painting of things, but they could embroider. In Charleston, there was a Ursuline Catholic nun group that did embroidery. There was Mrs. Philip Shuckman did embroidery. She did a bunch of embroidered colors. So these are beautiful embroidery. The painting tended to go to men who had sign painting businesses. And they don't have a stencil where they would cut the letters out and then just slap the paint on. They would pencil mark it, they would measure at the pencil market, and then paint between the pencil market entirely by hand. I can't do that. I can't draw stick people. So I'm not gonna be the guy doing this kind of a thing, painting a flag. So this is a great example of a militia era flag, and just the kind of care and love that would go into making this. If it's presented by the ladies, this thing probably was paid for by subscription, where you pass the hat. And then you hire a professional flag maker. That's not made by the ladies. Not something this ornate with the fringe. This is a professional job. They might have done the embroidery. I've found accounts where some women would do some embroidery on something and then send the flag off to the flag maker to be finished, and then that flag maker would do it. But a lot of times as the war would break out for Southern units, if the canton was big enough, they would cut this part off and sometimes use that as their company flag, or sometimes repurpose this into a First National. I've seen both. This is another great flag that was captured down on the Gulf Coast, a company of the 9th, is it, Mississippi? Where are we? 3rd, that's right, the 3rd, I should know that, 3rd Mississippi Regiment. Lone Star, something of a magnolia. There's the drawing of what it looked like a longer time ago, captured by Connecticut troops down on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. You had the Biloxi area, Ship Island, things of that down there, and northern units will be introduced into the Gulf Coast, and the point was to try to start cutting off the blockade running ports. So you're going to have campaigns down there to do that, and this is a great flag. This has always been one of my favorite flags in the collection. It's looking like, yeah, there might be faded red. There's a border here. You can see a trace of it up there. So the paint might have, and then you've got the red hoist edge on fringe. So that nominally meets the Republic of Mississippi flag, and then you've got your ties, which are very fragile to attach to your staff. And that's a lot would be ties doing that. But this is a great flag, and you can see what happens sometimes with paint and silk over times, and with the trace of the red bar gone down here as well. Paint will fade. Silk is a biodegradable natural material too. So, and one of the flags that I saw yesterday were the Wayne Rifles flag. The letters are completely eaten through. There was too much acid in the paint. It'll just chew right through the silk. Here's another one of my favorite flags. I have a nice file on this one at home. Don't think you can't conserve this, because you can. Modern conservation techniques are incredible nowadays. Back compared to the old Fowler method was, I think, the 1940s, where she just put netting all over the flags, and you have to sit there with little scissors and snip them away. The Mississippi Devils, this one, the northern newspapers made fun of the name after it was captured in the Island Number 10 campaign, which is the border of Tennessee and Missouri. At New Madrid, Missouri, the Madrid Band. Island Number 10 is now Peninsula Number 10. And if you're into American earthquakes, that's where the big ones happen, is the New Madrid Fault. But this flag was captured there. It was a first national flag. Mississippi Devils, Our Rights, presented by the ladies. It's the Yawkna. Did I pronounce that right? Because I was mispronouncing counties yesterday. So it's not Octobeha. What is it again? Octobeha. Thank you. There we go. I'll get it right sometime. Find out. I got flip the page towards the back. But there we are. The northern newspapers had a field day at Mississippi Devils, and presumably, because I've never seen the device on the other side, it actually belongs to the Yawkna Rifles, Yochna. Is that a county? A little town? Okay, a little town. And the regiment it came from was the 1st Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee. There was another regiment I talked about in my program yesterday about the 1st Mississippi Valley Regiment. These are what's going to become Confederate units. They are amalgamation units. You have like 4 companies from this state, 3 companies from that state, 2 companies from that state, and we'll change them to Confederate. These are Western theater only organizations. There is a Confederate engineer unit in the east, but the combat units are all out here in the west. And this regiment will become the 4th Confederate Infantry and will serve as the 4th Confederate Infantry. The only one that bucks that, where you have multiple companies from different states, is the 5th Confederate Infantry. That's an entirely Tennessee command. It's what's left of Knox Walker's 2nd, one of the 2 Irish regiments from Tennessee, and the 21st, both of whom got shot to pieces at Shiloh, and they just dumped them into one unit. For whatever reason, didn't name them one or the other Tennessee. They named them the 5th Confederate. So, and their battle flag is a Hardee pattern flag that looks like the 3rd one that I showed in the program yesterday. And that's the regiment that killed James McPherson in the Battle of Atlanta as he rode out to see where the Confederate attack was coming from and rode into their picket line and got shot. But do you have an ongoing flag conservation program where people can donate?
We do.
Please donate. In fact, here, I'm going to lead the charge right now, right here, and I'm going to throw the gauntlet down. I'm putting $20 to start. Right there. Who wants to take my $20? I'll give it to you because you're. Who do I give this to? There you go. So you would be surprised what a conservationist can do with that. It is a jigsaw puzzle to be sure, but when they get done putting the pieces together, you're going to have a pretty nice looking color. So please contribute to their efforts here for doing that. And that is a great reason why, and I'm really glad you put this out for that reason, because I think it shows the people what you can do with modern conservation. Here is a great example. There's a great example. A couple of the other flags around the corner are great examples. So please do that while you're here. So let's see, what do you want me to do? You want to do Katrina first, or? Well, here, it's a nice big pretty flag in the middle. Let's do Katrina. Okay, we'll do Katrina. So I live in Clarksville, Tennessee, which is northwest of Nashville, about 45 minutes, and I'm on the Kentucky line. Y'all come and visit me on my front porch, and I'll go, hey, folks, see that line of trees? The other side of that, it's Kentucky. That's where the bourbon and the horses are. Katrina came right over my town. So hurricanes that tend to hit the Gulf Coast between like Mississippi and New Orleans will shoot right up the Mississippi River. When it gets to Memphis, they go, okay, time to take us kind of an oblique right turn. And that's exactly what they do every single time. Took out my apple tree. Took out the apple tree. This is amazing to see a large flag this big that flew during Katrina that's not more beat up, to be quite frank. We have a flag in Tennessee where a tornado hit downtown Nashville, and the Tennessee state flag was flying on our Capitol dome, and it blew out the center blue circle of the flag with the 3 stars. And that landed somewhere else, and they've got the rest of the flag in the Tennessee State Museum. I'm trying to figure out how it cut that stitching out, but it sure did. But this is a really awesome survivor of a very, very bad storm that affected quite a lot of people, particularly on the Gulf Coast, your state, New Orleans, Louisiana, and then on up the Mississippi River Valley. We got, I don't know, God, like 8 inches, 9 inches of rain or something like that. But I'm stunned when I saw this yesterday that it's not more beat up. I really am, because your fly end, again, as I said, that's where your real wear and tear is going to start on a flag, because that flaps the most. And that sound you hear, the flag flapping, that's from the fly doing its thing. Over here, y'all changed your flag a few years ago from the one in 1894, and this was a model. Where's Clay? Yeah, okay. Yeah, this was a model that was proposed and voted on, and they would do some tweaks. Help me out with the tweaks, Clay, you're the expert on these more than I am. The stars are a little bigger, correct? And then the stamen is a little more color filled, where it stands out a little bit more, but you're using a magnolia flower, the symbol of the state, and keeping it together. And then with the 20 stars for the 20th state, and then you have the Choctaw Star above the center. And like the new recent Georgia flag, "In God We Trust" is emblazoned on the central colors. It's an interesting design. I look at them. State flags can get real weird. At least you don't have Mississippi on it. It's like Iowa, Illinois. We know what state we are. Let's remind the people what state that is. So you have a nice, very colorful flag. I bet at the distance it looks really nice on a flagpole. I have to see if I can find one flying around somewhere so I can take a look at it. That's a very, very pretty flag. So the controversy, of course, over the 1894 flag using the Army of Northern Virginia battle flag. Georgia will do that in 1856 and also create a controversy. By the way, in the 1856 change in Georgia, the United Daughters of the Confederacy came out against that. No, you're not using that flag. The Georgia modern flag now is the Confederate First National with "In God We Trust" and the Georgia coat of arms in it. The original first Georgia state flag officially adopted in 1879, 879, is a Confederate First National flag with just a long blue canton with no symbol in it, and then in the 1900s they'll put the coat of arms. So, and that one was designed by Georgia Confederate veterans. So then Mississippi changes to the battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia, going into the Jim Crow era and the controversy of that. A very, very dark time in our history, and they've changed it to this, much like Georgia did a few years ago. At least you didn't make the mistake that Georgia did. The first flag they made as a proposal that lasted for about 1.5 years was lovingly called a Denny's placemat. It was a blue flag with the coat of arms in the middle, and then examples of every flag that flew over Georgia down below. And everybody's like, really? That's the best you could come up with? So the Denny's placemat didn't last very long, and the modern flag is the one that replaced it. And the traditional stars and stripes, 50 stars, 50 stripes, and of course as states join the Union, you're going to have more. World War II, you're going to have in the 40s. 49 is Alaska, I believe, and Hawaii is number 50. And those are a 1950s, if my memory, so I can look at the timeline here in the book. Memory serves in terms of what the stars are. And of course, you get Puerto Rico and say Guam or somebody, Marianas or whatever, joins, you'll have to figure out how you're going to put stars in there. And one of the things the Flag Act is laying out exactly how the stars are supposed to be placed onto the flag in rows. So they'll have to figure out if they had 51 or 52 to do it. The Confederates on some flags are like, okay, we got a circle here, let's just stick one there, you know, and then, or up here or something like that. Or if we've had too many mint juleps, let's just take a bunch of stars and slap them up there and see what it looks like once we get sober the next day. But the United States flag is very codified now. You can download online the military regulations for all the service branches in terms of what the stars and stripes are supposed to look like. And then there's the civic flags as well. And the flag is a changed symbol in the United States. Before the Civil War, you would have them on government buildings and military posts, but Americans tended not to fly it. It's a post-war and particularly 20th century phenomena. Spanish-American War, late 1890s, and on into World War I, World War II, Korea, etc. Becomes a much more American phenomena. I live in an army town. I see these flags everywhere. And along with the guy across the street who's a proud Texan, that's the first thing he put up when he moved in. You know, honey, look, a guy from Texas, how can you tell? Look at his flagpole. Because we get a lot of people from all over the country living there, so their state flags go up too. But stars and stripes are all over military towns and all over the United States, all over your city, I'm sure, state capitol, any other government buildings, and probably a number of homes in the city. And then this is, of course, an example of the 1874 flag. 94, boom, there we go. 94 flag. And this is, you can see sometimes the flag company, this is Annan, right, Clay? Annan is a long time flag maker. They started before the Civil War, and they still make flags. Not so much military colors even back then, but patriotic flags and some government contracts. So Annan made that one, and that's the flag that was replaced by the alteration of the flag that we see down there. So flags can't, Minnesota just changed their flag, 6 months ago? I think it was. They changed their flag. So flags are evolving. They're always going to evolve. Cities will add, hey, we need a flag, in some town. Clay said you're from Aberdeen. Does Aberdeen have a town or a city flag?
I don't know that we do. Jackson does.
Jackson does. Okay, where I live in Clarksville does, Nashville does, counties have flags. Things of that nature. So flags are everywhere, which is why there's nerds like me to keep busy. But there's some interesting organizations like North American Vexillological Association. They go just goofy when a new state flag or a new country flag changes. You'll go on their website and there's just, wow, this stinks. That's great. No, it isn't. I think it should be like this. And these are flag nerds to the 30th power. I'm trying not to go there to keep my level of sanity left. But flags are passionate. They cause controversy. They cause pride in your nation. They cause pride in your town, to defend your town as a military unit. They cause pride in being able to fight for your freedom, the flag behind you there. Very emotional objects, and they represent every single one of us in this room, especially that one right there. Questions, comments? Do we have time for those? I don't know what timeline we have, Drew.
Absolutely. Let's